Hello everyone in C++ programming. This video is to get you started on Project 8 that is due on April 5th. Project 8 utilizes is supposed to utilize 3 functions. So what I'm going to do in this video is get you a working program that is reading the file of scores and has some function prototypes in it, and then you will be left with having to write the functions that are described here in numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I've got a just a kind of an empty template program that I can start with. Always easier to do that than starting from scratch. So here's Genie, and we'll go open up that template. I think I saved it in my downloads folder. Let's see, downloads, Project 8. Yeah, there's a template. Doesn't have a whole lot in it, as you can see. So let's go ahead and get all the includes here so you don't have to worry about those. So in addition to the IO stream, since we're working with files, we need the FS stream. We're going to also need the string header, and we're also going to need to do some formatted output with the fixed and the precision stuff. So that means we need IO man IP. Okay, so we've got our main function here, but as you recall, there are 2 other functions that need to be created in this program. The main function here, if you read the instructions, is the function that will have a while loop in it to read through the text file of scores. And it's got student names and scores in it. And so our main function here will have a while loop to process that scores file. And then we'll have 2 other functions. If you look here, it says the main function will have that while loop, and then it needs to call this calc average function for each row. The calc average function needs to call a function named find lowest to find the lowest test score, because it's going to drop that. So let's go ahead and get this started here. Gonna go ahead and let's see what this thing is supposed to be named again. Let's see, average score your last name, whatever your last name happens to be. So I'll just copy that, and then I'll go into my Genie program here. Right now it's just working with that template. Can do a file and save as and do that. So now you can see my name is average score, and I'll go ahead and put that in here as well. And you'll obviously need to change this to match your last name. Okay, so let's do our function prototypes. So we said, looking at the instructions, that we needed a function named calc average. and trying to see what data type needs to be here. Let's go look and see what the output looks like in the program. Whether they're printing out a test score with decimals in it. So that means we probably need to use a double for our calc average function. You saw the decimals in there. So double calc average. Now it says that there are how many scores here? 5 test scores passed to it. 5 test scores. So, and the test scores, let's see if it says what those test scores are. Guess we need to go look at the data before we write our while loop to process this. We need to know a little bit about our data. And here's the data file right here, scores.txt. So we'll go ahead and download that to the same folder as our project file. Save that. Okay, so now we've got our average score and we've got our scores file. Let's see what's in that. Okay, it has a student name here, which is obviously a string, and then all the test scores do not have any decimal places on them, so they are all ints. So, and you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ints there on each row. So that's what's in our scores.txt file. So let's go finish this function prototype here. Okay, there's our double calc average. You remember the prototype from the functions lecture has to have that semicolon on the end of it. And then we'll do a int, comma, int, comma, int, comma, int, comma, int. So the calc average is taking those 5 test scores. And then if you remember from the instructions, it says that the calc average function has to call the find lowest function. So we're going to go ahead and do a template, a prototype for the find lowest. So that's going to be, since these are all ints and all it's doing is looking through those ints and handing us back the lowest one of those 5 scores, our find lowest function is going to be an int. Find lowest is what that's going to look like. And it's taken 5 ints in, so I can just copy that and paste it. So there's our 2 function prototypes. Now remember, you're responsible for writing these functions. I've just created the prototypes for them. And those functions will be created below the main function. So how about this? Define the calc average function here. Remember that this function must call the find lowest function. Next, we're gonna define the find lowest function here. We already did. We have done code lab items in the past to implement logic for finding the highest and the lowest item. Those were back in the the if statements. Basically, the logic is like save the first test, then have a series of independent, not if, else, if, just if statements. Compare the lowest, the saved lowest one to each of the rest of the scores. You should have 4 if statements, one after the other, not nested. So save the first test, then have a series of independent if, else if, just if statements, and compare the saved lowest score to each of the rest of those scores. Now, if you want to see what something like that looks like, again, we did it in Code Lab, but next week we'll be talking about function templates, and there's actually a sample here in the function templates. See how these if statements are by themselves? Okay, this particular template was something to find the maximum of 3 tests or 3 values. Obviously, if you're doing find the lowest, instead of having a greater than, you'd have a less than. Okay, but if we're doing find the lowest of 3, you can see that the logic is save the first one, check to see if the second one is greater, and then if it is, save it, and then check the third one to see if it's greater than the highest one, and if it is, save it. Now that's doing 3, and remember this is a template, so where it's got T's, you wouldn't have that in your program. You'd have ints there. But so that's kind of the logic process. You see how these ifs are not nested, they're just one after the other. So that's kind of the approach that I was trying to write out there for you in the comments for what we were doing. Not the exam. I want to go back to the Project 8 instructions. So back to Genie here. So you're going to have define your calc average function after these comments. You're going to define your find lowest function after these comments, and remember that the calc average has to call the find lowest function. And here's your function prototypes already done. So let's process that text file so that you'll have a head start on getting that done. Okay, making sure my tabs line up. Okay, so we're going to read that text file, ifstream input file. Okay, that's our stream. Input file dot open. The file name is scores.txt. Remember, this scores.txt file has to be in exactly the same folder as where your program is saved. Okay, so now we've got it open. We need a variable to read the student name in. If you remember when we were looking at that text file right here, the first thing is the student name. So that's what we've got to read in, and it's a string. So let's do this, string student. Okay. So now we got 5 test scores after that student's name, so we're going to need 5 variables. Int score 1, score 2, score 3, score 4, score 5. To hold test scores. This is to hold the student name. Okay, so we've got those created. Now let's create our while loop. While input file. The first thing in that file was the student name. See it? Right there, there, there. So first thing in the file name in the file is the student name. We're going to read it into our student variable right here. Then we're going to get, whoops, wrong way. Score 1. Oops, still going the wrong way. 2. Okay. We got 5 of those things to read in, so I'm going to save myself some typing here. That's score 3, score 4, score 5. Get them all in. Okay, so that's our while, and then we'll have our squiggly brackets for our while loop. So this is the end of the while loop. To read students and test. Okay, so that's the end of our while loop. Now inside here is where you're gonna have to do your work, and you're gonna need to call those that function to calc the average. Call the calc average function, and remember it's going to have some stuff inside here when you call it, right? Going to have all that stuff separated with commas. Now those X's are obviously representing student, and then all the scores. Actually, you don't need the student name, do you? You don't need that. You just need to pass all the test scores. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so And remember, the calc average function has to call the function to find the lowest. So we can go ahead and just test our while loop to make sure it's working. If it's working, then we should see all the student names coming out, right? And then you would have your results from your calc average call right here. Okay, I'm not going to put anything there. I'm going to put my indel so that we just move down to a new line. So let's see if this works. One thing that we do need to do is outside of that while loop, we need to be closing that input file. Whoops. Input file dot close. Okay, so this is where we're printing it out. This is where you would be calling the calc average function. So let's try it and see if we're getting a bunch of students out here. Okay, see if I typoed anything. So we'll save it and then we'll build it. Looks like it built fine. So let's see if we get a list of student names out, because we're reading everything in right here. We're looping through there, and remember that this is where you're going to be calling your calc average. You can call it right here on this line. But let's go ahead and run it and see. Now remember, I already downloaded this students the scores.txt file. So here we go. And it's working. Boss, Campbell, Doe, Udy, Franks, Gobble. Did we get all of them? The last one is Gobble, and that's right, because there they are. Okay, so you have, if you watch this video, you have the code written to read that file. You've got to write these functions and make sure that you're handling that properly. And one hint that I would give you here in this calc average function, everybody always gets hung up on how do I drop the lowest grade. Well, if you, inside this calc average function, if you call the find lowest function and have it return the lowest grade, then all you need to do is add up these 4 test scores in your calc average function and subtract the lowest, whatever the find lowest gives you back. You need to subtract that from the total, and you've just dropped the lowest grade. And if you do that, then you're dividing by 4 instead of 5, right? Because we dropped the lowest one. So good luck with Project 8. You've got a really big head start on getting it done. You just need to write this calc average function and this find lowest function and actually change your program to call it here inside of our while loop. I think the program has some headings that get printed too. You could print those headings outside of the while loop here. And then I think it has, at the end of the program, it has you print the end of the project message, whatever that is. So good luck, and you've got a good start on Project 8 now.